So fellow Africans, if it's your first time here, kindly like the video. Now, according to the president of Burkina Faso, that is President Ibrahim Traoré, he spoke to the public actually 24 hours ago. And he told the public that the revolution that is currently happening in Burkina Faso was inevitable, that the revolution had to happen for Burkina Faso to realize its potential. Now, let's have a look at a glimpse of what President Traoré said, and when we come back, we can analyze this video further. Let's watch this.
Et vous devez être fiers. La révolution a besoin de citoyens nouveaux, de citoyens patriotes, intègres, solidaires. Et au cours de cette immersion, vous apprendrez beaucoup de choses. Vous devrez apprendre à être de bons patriotes, à ne jamais trahir la mère patrie.
And you see, the problem with Africa is simple. Even though the revolution is taking place in Burkina Faso, unfortunately, actually this one I'm saying while sad, that unfortunately, most of African leaders are condemning what is happening in Burkina Faso. In fact, can you even imagine this? That in fact, President of Burkina Faso, that is President Traoré, has never been given right to audience in the African Union meetings. Can you even believe that? That the African Union is believing that Traoré was not democratically elected. So according to the Constitution of African Union, Traoré can never be given a right to audience when it comes to African Union meetings. Simple. That look, yes, you are a cool leader, yes. You are the current president of Burkina Faso, yes, but we don't recognize how you took power. And permit me to say this. I normally don't like using this term coup leaders or coup in Africa. This is just an extraordinary exchange of power. When coup happens within countries, mostly in Africa, it is normally done because people are tired of the current government or the current regime. So Traoré is never recognized by the African Union. He can never give a speech in African Union. But the current president of Burundi paid a visit in Burkina Faso, even though the guy has never been given right to audience in African Union. The president of African Union paid a visit in the Sahel region, thinking on what the Sahel region is doing right that Africa as a continent can emulate. And for this, I second him because I think African Union is a toothless bulldog. Because if you look at the geographical map of Africa, conflicts everywhere. And these conflicts have been failed to be solved by the African Union. Why am I saying African Union is a toothless bulldog? Because African Union is 70% externally funded by donors. Can you even imagine that? 70%. The money that they are using in African Union is 70% funded by external people. Now, if African Union can be funded 70% externally, then they don't have a voice. They can be controlled, and that is what is being done in the African Union. Okay, so I applaud President Traoré for massive development in Burkina Faso, and in fact, the Burkinabès, those are the people, the citizens of Burkina Faso, they are impressed by what Traoré is doing. Okay, some of the media, the news agencies, they don't show you the exact thing that is happening in Burkina Faso. But what we know is there is massive development in Burkina Faso. Massive development. Talk about infrastructure project perfectly being executed. Talk about fight against corruption perfectly being executed. Investment in local and international companies. Investment in the education sector, research being done perfectly in education sector. Burkina Faso has just collaborated with Russia, where scientists from Burkina Faso are being flown from Burkina Faso to Russia to go and study in Russia, so that after being flown in Russia, go study in Russia, come back to Burkina Faso, apply what you've learned in Russia in Burkina Faso. So those are some of the developments that we as Africans should be aspiring for. And we have to talk about them and applaud President Traoré for what he is doing. The revolution is changing the face of Burkina Faso. The revolution is changing the face of Burkina Faso. True. And even the citizens of Burkina Faso, they can attest to that, because they are seeing changes, massive changes in Burkina Faso. Changes that have never been seen before since independence. And permit me to say this, because President Traoré, when he assumed power in 2022, he said clearly that I'm assuming power in 2022, but the state of Burkina Faso now can be compared to the 18th century, because Burkina Faso was languishing in poverty. There were no roads, there were no good schools, there were no hospitals. But now, go to Burkina Faso and see what is happening in Burkina Faso. Massive developments. Massive developments. And I love that. Me as an African, even though I'm not from Burkina Faso, I am an African of goodwill. So if some leaders, the likes of Burkina Faso president, the likes of the Botswana president, the likes of Ghanaian president, if they are doing the right thing, then it's incumbent of us to speak unto what they are doing right. I love it when I see Africa prospering, okay? Because Africa will be great. Africa must be great. And it's our duty, we as Africans, to talk positive about Africans, to talk positive about this continent. Because if we don't, then we'll continue punching below our weight. Traoré is a messiah in Burkina Faso. In February, when there was an attempted coup, guess what happened? Citizens of Burkina Faso, they marched to the presidential palace. Can you even imagine that? That there is a coup right now, but the citizens are marching to the presidential palace in order to protect the president, because they are seeing the good things that the president is doing. Tell me, in Africa, where can that even happen? In Africa, where can that even happen? Whereby, when your president wants to be ousted, the citizens march to the palace to protect that president. Never. But it's happening in Burkina Faso. So, ladies and gentlemen, Africa will be great. We only need leaders who love citizens. We only need leaders who are passionate about this continent for us to realize our potential. And if this is the trend in Burkina Faso, in the next 20 years, Burkina Faso will be catapulted to another different orbit level as far as development is concerned. Different orbit level. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, Africa will be great. Africa must be great. Africa must be great. So, if it's your first time here, man, kindly show me some love by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and we spearhead this movement of making Africa great again. Thank you and see you next time. Bye-bye for now.